Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Jaya Jaya, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada Jai, Jai Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Utale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Samaniti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyvari Pashyatya Desha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. I'm going to discuss now chapter 2, verse number 52. And I have a few screens prepared. And then I hope to just give a short discussion, and then we can open up for a general discussion. I want to call attention to the lyrics of the song, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Gopi Janavallabha, Giri Varadhari. These are all names for Krishna, and they invoke memory of remembrance of Krishna's Leelas. Leela, for those who don't know, is a drama or a pastime of the Supreme Lord. Within Vaishnavism, that's followers of Krishna, Rama, Vishnu. There are many Leelas. The Supreme Lord appears on earth as an incarnation or as incarnations, many, thousands of incarnations. And when he appears, he has his drama or his play, his pastime with his devotees. Sometimes he brings his intimate associates with him, and sometimes he has interactions with his devotees who are here on earth. So this first name, Radha Madhava, means dear to Radha. Radha is his most intimate associate. Kunja Bihari, that he plays in the among the bushes and groves of Vrindavan. Gopi Janavallabha, and he's also very dear to all the gopis. Gopis are the cowherd girls in Vrindavan. Girivaradhari, he lifts the Govardhan hill. Girivaradhari, he maintains this Govardhan hill. Yashodanandana, he is the son of Yashoda. So when he appears in Vrindavan, although he's the Supreme Lord, he appears as the son of Yashoda. And Braja Jana Ranjana, he's also dear to all the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Jamna Tira Banachari. So on the bank, Tira means on the bank of the Jamna, the river Jamna, there is a forest, the Vana, and he walks on the bank of the river Jamna, next to the forest of Vrindavan. So all of these names, of course, one has to understand these different Leelas, but encapsulated in each one of these names is a kind of a meditation or remembrance of Krishna. So through the name of Krishna, Hare Krishna, we see here the second mantra. We remember Krishna, and Krishna embodies all of these Leelas. Krishna is the same. He's absolute, so his name is the same as he is. And when we say Krishna, he's dancing on our tongue. And these names of Krishna in his different Leelas invoke remembrance of Krishna specifically connected with those Leelas. Now, moving on, I'm going to share the screen. I should be able to do that, right? Yes. Let's see if I'm doing it. Okay, here. Share this. And then, is that right? That's the full screen? Yes, you can see the full screen there? Okay. So I have to see if I can get these out of the way. All right. So I wanted to just review a few verses. At the bottom, there's this verse 252, but going back a few verses, O Dhananjay, rid yourself of all fruitive activities by devotional service and surrender fully to that consciousness. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. So just to sort of restate, rid yourself of all fruitive activities. That means that when we do our work, we're attached to the results of that work, which means that we work hard, we get money, we're attached to the money, we use the money for our pleasure, for our comfort. But the Krishna conscious process is different from that. It's that instead we use the fruits, the results of our work for yoga, for devotional service. So rid yourself of these fruitive activities through this process of bhakti yoga or devotional service, and surrender fully to that consciousness, meaning be detached from the fruits. But on the other hand, those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Number 50, a man engaged in devotional service or bhakti rids himself of both good and bad actions. So the result of this being detached from the fruits is that one no longer suffers the reactions of karma. Now, karma, sometimes the popular pop definition of karma is just that I do something, say something ill against somebody, or I do something ill and there's a bad reaction to that. Or maybe I give $1 to a homeless person and I get $10. I find $10 on the street. So people think that that's karma, but karma comes with our birth. Karma is the thing that carries us into the next body. So karma dictates, it's the active principle that dictates the body that we receive and that we continue to act, that we use to continue our actions, our professions, or all of our actions. So devotional service rids one of the good and bad karma, even in this life. So therefore strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. So here Krishna is talking about work. Work means karma. Karma means work. So the essence of work, or the art of work, art here doesn't mean painting. It means the skill or the essence, which is yoga. The wise who are engaged in devotional service take refuge in the Lord and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of action. So again, this reinforces this idea from the verse 50, that this devotional service rids oneself of good and bad actions. So it expanded a little bit here. It frees one from the cycle of birth and death. Cycle of birth and death is in the karma. Again, as I said, is this active principle that carries one from life to life. And how is this done? By renouncing the fruits of action in the material world. In this way, they can attain that state beyond all miseries, beyond suffering. So today's verse, when your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. So intelligence also means, we'll see in the verse, buddhi also means, well, I should say that intelligence here specifically means the ability to discriminate between matter and spirit. It doesn't just mean that Einstein has an advantage over us because this word intelligence is being used. It's not intelligence in the sense of IQ. I mean, we can understand here to some degree that this is a 5,000-year-old reference, intelligence, and IQ has only been popular in the last 100 years, something like that. So intelligence here is the discriminatory power, discrimination, good judgment. So when one is able to discriminate between matter and spirit, when one's intelligence has passed out of this dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that is, all that it has been heard and all that is to be heard. We'll discuss what that means in a second. Yada te moha kalilang buddhir vyati tareshyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. So yada te moha kalilang buddhir vyati tareshyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. Yada, when, te, your, moha kalilang buddhi vyati tarishyati. So when your buddhi, your intelligence, vyati tarishyati, it's the sentence is a little, because of poetic license, the sentence is a little turned around here. So moha kalilam is the object, buddhi is the subject. So yada te buddhi, when your buddhi, your intelligence, vyati tarishyati, surpasses the moha kalilam, this dense forest of illusion, then tada, at that time, yada tada, that's a typical construction. Yada means when, and tada means then. So when you vyati tarishyati, when you surpass, then tada, gantasi, you will go, gantasi, you will go, nirvedam, or you will go, or you will achieve nirvedam, indifference to shrotavyasya, all that is to be heard, and shrutasya, all that is already heard. Now, shrotavyasya doesn't mean all that is to be heard in the future. It means all that one should hear. So that's the to be, means that must be heard. Translation, when your intelligence is passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. You could take it as future, but in general, this means that all that one must hear, or all that one should hear, all that is to be heard. Purport. There are many good examples in the lives of the great devotees of the Lord, of those who become indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service to the Lord. So the implication here, Prabhupada right from the beginning, in this first sentence, is giving the further description of what this shrotavyasya and shrutasya cha. These are references to the Vedas. So one becomes indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas because in general, the Vedas, especially Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, are focused on the results of work through yajna, through rituals, through specific rituals, one tries to achieve a good result in this world. So the cycle of karma, yajna, there's one does work, one gets the fruits of that work, or karma phala, and one uses those fruits in yajna, according to the Vedas, and through those yajnas, one gets, again, when one does work, one gets the fruits of those work, that work. So this is an honorable, this is pious, this is almost divine process. This is a heavenly process. And Krishna in the 3rd chapter recommends this process, this cycle of karma, yajna. So Prabhupada starts, there are many good examples in the lives of the great devotees who become indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities, even though an experienced Brahmana. Sri Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and acharya in the line of devotees, says, and I'm not going to read the Sanskrit, "O Lord, in my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you. Bathing, I offer my obeisances unto you. O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me." Sometimes we're distracted in the West. We're so used to the word sin in the context of Christianity. It's difficult to understand in terms of the Vedic understanding. Sinful bondage means basically this bondage of karma bandha. So in this context, sinful bondage means that simply that we're bound by karma, by our desire to enjoy the fruits of karma. So our attachment to karma phala, or the fruits of karma, cause karma bandha, or bondage. So sinful bondage means karma bandha. So Madhavendra Puri says, I think this is sufficient for me. Then Prabhupada goes back and he explains that it's not so wretched that these Vedic rituals. He says the Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes, comprehending all kinds of prayer 3 times a day, taking a bath in the morning, offering respects to the forefathers, etc. But when one is fully Krishna conscious, fully in Krishna consciousness, and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he has already attained perfection. So let's go back here to the beginning of this paragraph. The Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes. So it's not as though these are condemned. Sometimes in Christianity, certain things are condemned as satanic, or this is because it doesn't conform 100% with the teachings. It's absolutely condemned. But there's a sort of Prabhupada is bringing them into perspective. These Vedic rites, or the yajnas, that involve the devas, the demigods, and the ancestors, pitris, they're considered inferior to bhakti. So if one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme, Lord Krishna, he no longer has to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in revealed scriptures. Penances in Sanskrit, tapa, and sacrifices means yajna. And similarly, if one has not understood that the purpose of the Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engages in the rituals and so forth, then he is uselessly wasting time in such engagements. Persons in Krishna consciousness transcend the limit of Shabda Brahma, or the range of the Vedas and Upanishads. So this is quite a lot here. Prabhupada says at the end that this last sentence means that not only does one transcend karma kanda, but the Upanishads are called upasana kanda or jnana kanda. So there's karma kanda, which means one is attached to the fruits of work, and one performs these lofty rituals. Actually, they involve a much higher level of action, and they elevate one to the divine realms, to the realms of the devas. And the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas, they involve, here the Upanishads, they involve realization of the self, or Shabda Brahma. So Prabhupada is explaining here that Bhakti goes even beyond Jnana Kanda. So I want to call attention. So this is the last slide I have, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion. I'm harking back to the purport of the first verse. The last two sentences in the first verse of this second chapter we're discussing here, verse 52. So back in the first chapter, back in the first verse, Prabhupada kind of summarizes the chapter by saying that this chapter instructs us in self-realization by an analytical study of the material body and the spirit soul. Then this realization is made possible by working with the fruitive being situated in the fixed conception of the real self. I love this summary, I love this summary of this entire chapter in 2 sentences. And to me, it indicates, the first sentence indicates a kind of a theoretical overview, and then a pragmatic overview. Self-realization by an analytical study. Analytical study means Sankhya. The title of this chapter is Sankhya Yoga. So analytical study of the material body and the spirit soul. And this realization is made possible by working with the fruitive being situated in the fixed conception of the real self. So Buddhi Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, and Buddhi Yoga. And Prabhupada often relates Buddhi Yoga to Karma Yoga, or Krishna consciousness. So working with the fruitive being situated in the fixed conception of the real self. So for me, this is I see this as sometimes a kind of dance in which we're trying to identify as soul. Prabhupada says fixed conception of the real self, meaning the soul. And yet, at the same time, we have to function in this world as fruitive beings. We are working in this world, and the fruits are coming from our work. And we have to somehow or other relate those fruits to the soul. It's almost, in a way, it's incompatible. The soul and the body are different, and yet they have to work together to achieve self-realization. So one more time, when your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. So this is again a reference to the Vedas. And this means, for me, this also means the things in this world. Now, the Vedic knowledge, all that has been heard and all that is to be heard or all that is to be done, this indicates Vedic knowledge, which is a very high, it's on a very high level. Prabhupada says at the end of the purport, the last sentence of the purport, persons in Krishna consciousness transcend the limit of Shabda Brahma, or the range of the Vedas and the Upanishads. So this is a very high level. But what this verse means to me is that we devotees also transcend modern science and modern politics. These things, these are things that captivate us and keep us connected with the world. We're regularly involved. Many people are heavily distracted by political goings on. Currently, there's wars that we worry about, conflicts, violent conflicts. People get killed, and the media, because they're interested in reporting to the people in general, they say things like, oh, there was a crisis in the Middle East, and by the way, I don't know, some big actor or actress or singer got married, and then another one got divorced. And so all of these things cater to our interest in mundane conflicts. They cater to our interest in this world. And these are things that, as the Bhagavatam says, these kinds of, there's so many things that we hear in this world, and we have to cut through this, all of these sounds that are big distractions. So even though they're very serious, sometimes they seem to be very serious, because they, especially in the last few hundred years, we've become very concerned about humanity. What's happening with humanity? And these countries, these are all relatively new. The United States is a couple hundred years old or so. And some other countries are even newer. Israel is a pretty new country. So is India. India is a new country. And there was no India. India is a conglomeration of many countries speaking different languages and with different customs. So people are very strongly identified as Indians. But this is a relatively new concept, and one can perhaps trace it back to 800 AD. It may be that far back. Back in 800 AD, a Hindu was a Buddhist, or a Vaishnava, or a Shaiva, or a Shakta. So Hindu included Buddhists. So now it's different. All of these names, they evolve into something different. United States was 13 colonies 200 years ago. Now it includes California, which is a new state. So all of these things are in flux. Mexico was New Spain, and people identify so strongly as Mexican or American or British. Even somebody who was British 1,000 years ago was something else, something different. So even in Europe, even in India, all of these countries, China, All of these countries are in flux. So we identify so strongly with these political designations that we forget who we are, who we really are. And now this concept of racism, it's very prominent. And it started to become prominent in the 1920s and then 1930s, and especially in the 1950s in the movies and media. A lot of discussion of Native Americans and Black people. And then in the 1960s and 70s, there were a lot of movements for civil rights and the equality of Black people. And yet this concept of my body and what color it is and what language I speak and what culture I follow and what religion I follow, these are they're so ingrained in us, but at the same time, these are temporary. So Prabhupada says this last sentence here, this realization, meaning the realization of self-realization, the realization that I'm not this body, I'm soul, is made possible by working with the fruit of being situated in the fixed conception of the real self. So it's not as though we're just artificially renouncing this idea that I'm American or Indian or Black or white, but we're trying to bring it into the correct perspective, into the idea that this fixed conception of the real self, because these other conceptions are temporary. All of them are temporary. Historically, they're temporary, or they might even be temporary within our own lives. Within our lives, things come and go. Political events, winter, summer, spring, fall, these are plagues, disease. We have disease, we have old age, youth. All of these things pass. So I'd like to open it for, let's see, how do I do this? I have to get rid of the, whoops. Did I, so I paused, I stopped share. There. Okay, so can we open up for a little lively discussion?
Yeah, Prabhu. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hare Krishna. I think a theme that I was hearing was how this transcendental knowledge of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna's teaching, with it, you go beyond different things of this world that, we heard before or we'll hear later. It goes beyond religious rituals, different kinds of religious activities. And in other places in the Gita, we hear it. It goes beyond certain kinds of yoga. I think you were touching on it, like yoga of, knowledge, trying to understand, through the process of yoga, trying to understand things. And it goes beyond the yoga, like the mechanical process of yoga by which ultimately you try to perceive the soul. So, and God. So I guess my question is, well, in the world in which, in that world in which we're hearing things are coming and going, and what's typical is, I think that one group of people thinks that what they're doing or what their group stands for is better than what another group is doing or what they're standing for. Or sometimes it's my religion is better than your religion, or my way of understanding spirituality or perhaps God is superior to yours. And I guess what I'm wondering is, what would you say if someone who's heard that about comparing things of this material world as well as comparing religious and spiritual concepts or practices, what would you say if they said, well, Dayananda Prabhu, it sounds like this teaching of Bhagavad Gita is doing the same thing. It's saying, this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, this is better than that way of seeing things. This is better than that religious group's practice. This is the higher practice. So, and if and they say, it seems to me that when I hear this, it sounds like it's yet another competitive sort of way of addressing others who are not part of the Bhagavad Gita followers group, which seems to me it's a mundane thing that you think you're better than someone else. It's more of the same of the material world. So what would you say if someone addressed what you're saying in that way, Prabhu? Hare Krishna. You're muted, Prabhu. We need to unmute you.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah, it told me in big letters here in the middle of the screen, unmute yourself. So yes, that's a natural tendency that, well, first of all, the things that we perceive as good and bad in this world, sometimes the Shastra, the literature can be very harsh. And Prabhupada made this comment, sort of harsh, almost hyperbole, that the things that we perceive as good and bad in this world are like wet stool and dry stool. So meaning that it's all material. This is the material world, and we have the tendency to be drawn towards one thing that we think is good and repelled by another thing we think is bad, but it's really relative. And the world itself is, within the context of this world, good and bad are just relatively bad. It's bad and worse, in other words. But so I wanted to say that first. That kind of addresses the first part of what you were saying. Then, or I'm trying to address it anyway. The other thing is that you're saying that it appears that we're being competitive, even if we present some knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita. I'll say, first of all, I've always appreciated the tendency of Vaishnavism and some of the other religions of India to be a lot more sort of syncretic, or a lot more accommodating to other ideas than in the West. Many within the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, it's very black and white. People are within those traditions often say that it's either my way or the highway. So whereas within the Vaishnava tradition and other traditions, there's much more room for, well, this is not completely condemned, but at least it's on the way. In other words, it's not the highest, but it's not the lowest. Something could be the lowest, but there's an accommodation for many ideas. There is a theme, however, within in the Bhagavad Gita, and that's service. In the Bhagavad Gita and throughout to the Vaishnava doctrine, and that's service. So there's a concept of lower service and higher service. The highest service being service to the Supreme. And so this indicates a measure of less selfishness. If we are selfish and we can only think to serve ourselves and our own senses, this is considered to be the lowest form of service. Whereas serving our families may be a little higher, serving community, nation, serving the devas, the universe, serving the universe. Like now we're faced with this idea of in the environment, many people say that we are guilty of human centrism, meaning that we become so focused on the interests of humanity that we neglect the environment. So there's this ecocentrism or biocentrism, and then one could take this even further to say soul-centric or theocentric, that one becomes interested in serving the higher cause. And then our view is that the highest cause is the Supreme. So another aspect of this competition, personally, and this is, I have to admit, this is kind of a personal take on the competition between religions. And it's kind of based on, Prabhupada was sometimes asked about Buddhism or about Christianity, and he, like making the comparison with the two, or somehow one follower or somebody would ask him about, for example, Buddhism. So Prabhupada would say, well, do you follow Buddhism? Well, no, I don't follow Buddhism. So the point is, why are you interested? I mean, his response would be along the lines of, why are you interested in talking about Buddhism when you don't follow Buddhism? In other words, this is just theoretical. When it comes to all of these concepts, these ideas, these different religions, become serious and be a follower and adhere to the discipline. Learn about service and discipline and yoga and whatever the austerity that's required to do this. Learn about experiencing the joy that this discipline introduces. So these very practical things Prabhupada emphasized. So if you're interested in these things, then become a follower. And my own personal, as I said, my own personal take on this is that competition can be a very positive thing. This is what we are taught in a capitalist perspective, that if there's competition between two products or two companies, then that will encourage the companies to improve their services. So I feel like that also. If it's a positive competition, if Christians are trying very hard to become better Christians, to out-Christian the Muslims, and the Muslims are out-Musliming the Hindus, and the Hindus are out-Hinduing the whoever, then that's a positive thing. But if we start thinking that, oh, these others are condemned and it's all mixed with politics and economics, and we want just to conquer the others and impose one system on the others, the best thing is to set the best example. So our system is to do our best to set a good example in Krishna consciousness or in Vaishnavism, and yes, we may be competitive. We try to set the good example, and we say that, oh, this is the highest, this is the best, and we can point to individuals or to Srimati Radharani or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or the acharyas, and we say, look, these are the highest examples that we're trying to follow, and we challenge others. So we can be a little competitive, that we have something really good here. But we can't really say that if we're not following well, or if we can say it still. I mean, we can point to our philosophy and to the examples of the acharyas. The best, though, is to set a good example.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for the very interesting perspective that's based on an enlightened understanding of our teachings, but at the same time, a unique way of addressing the question. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? You don't have to ask a question. You can have. Why don't you volunteer your sort of take on something? And I like it if people disagree. I have a friend that I'm a writer, so I've been writing for some years now, and I send all my writings to my best friend, who I've known for 50 years, and he's under strict instructions to disagree with me. So I think that if it's a kind of a constructive disagreement, if we're just sort of playing it out like a game of volleyball or something, we're challenging each other to. So please, I welcome disagreements or doubts or comments, anything. Rafael.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for coming and instructing us on this. I have a comment and I have a question. This is about, you mentioned that we are fruitive beings, that we work and we strive to enjoy the fruits of our actions, but we also have to take care of ourselves. In the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna said to Arjuna that if we dedicate our lives to him, he will provide whatever we lack and keep what we actually don't lack. But I was wondering, I've always wondered, up to what point should I stop endeavoring for my well-being and let Krishna take over and take care of my life and guide me? Because I know I had to take care of myself, but I also had to let Krishna let Krishna do its work on me. And sometimes things happen unwillingly without me wanting them to happen, but they happen anyway. So I was wondering, up to what point should I just let it go? And to what point should I just keep trying to take care of myself? I had to provide, I had to pay my rent, I have to eat. But up to what point should I just say, oh, this is Krishna's will, maybe this is Krishna's a way of teaching me something, or I know there's a balance there, but I don't know what it is. What is the point where I say this is Krishna's will for me to pass through this or to suffer through this? And at what point should I say, no, I had to fight for my own self, I had to pay my rent, and I had to do this, I had to do that. I cannot do service all the time, maybe I can, I have to provide. But when should I let Krishna provide, and when should I fight so I can keep putting food on the table and pay my rent?
Well, there's a lot of practical. What immediately comes to mind are a number of sort of a lot of practical advice in this area. But one thing is that we all have our. One thing I noticed was that Prabhupada was a big fan of this statement that Krishna makes: "Dadami buddhi yogam tang." Krishna says, "I will give the intelligence." So dadami means I will give, and buddhi, and tam means to you. So I will give the intelligence, meaning that indicating that these things are really your decisions. You have to kind of navigate your own life and do the best you can. And you mentioned the word balance. And yes, that's another thing that I understand, that from Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is saying, don't eat too much, don't eat too little, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. So what does that mean? He just says too much, too little, too much, too little. So we have to navigate these things ourselves and be conscious of balance. Yes. And then one advice that Prabhupada often gives is that we shouldn't work so much that we neglect our spiritual life. So he's given his disciples and followers certain discipline, and that should be followed. So he encourages us as individuals to do our best to follow these disciplines and not get too distracted by our work. I remember there was a man who was he was a Bengali, and then he came to the United States. Actually, he got on a ship, and he was a crew member of a ship, and he was initiated by Prabhupada in India, one of the first Bengali initiates. So he got on a ship, and then when he got to the US, he just got off the ship and became an illegal immigrant. And he's still here. He's been here for 50 years or something. And so he came to see Prabhupada, and he was working at that time and endeavoring and trying to fit into the society and get money and advance in the society. That's why he came to the US. So Prabhupada's main advice to him was, don't neglect your spiritual life. Okay, you're here, you're working, you're trying to sort of establish yourself and get advanced. So that's kind of one instruction. And then you're also mentioning this, well, what if you are in the situation where you're struggling, and at what point do you just accept, well, this is Krishna's arrangement? And this happened to Prabhupada quite a lot also. It's not as though Prabhupada came with some set idea from India, and then it all unfolded in the 10 or 11 years that he was in the United States, and that he traveled around the world and established everything. He often tried different things, and he would give advice to his disciples. We'll try this, we'll try that. And so there has to be flexibility. And then if you get to a certain point, you think, well, it's not working, Krishna's arrangement, I have to try something new. So exactly how far do you go with that is kind of up to you. You have to realize, well, I'm just beating my head against the wall here, and it's not productive in my life, and it's distracting me from my spiritual life. So now I have to go a different direction. But these are all kind of individual decisions that you have to make. There's I know a lot of devotees, I'm not a subscriber of this, but I know a lot of devotees keep looking for formulas. They really want formulas. And I believe that sometimes they're over-attached to formulas. You know, look in the scriptures and you see that there's 3 modes of nature: goodness, passion, ignorance. But I like to see where Krishna says that these are all mixed, that sometimes passion is predominant, sometimes ignorance is predominant, and there's goodness that's mixed with ignorance, and so there's all these shades of gray in life. And you know, to find a specific formula for how you're going to live your life that's not my opinion of how life works. We have our spiritual challenge. We have our guru who gives us guidance, and we have the literature that gives us guidance, but we also have Krishna. We have to try to be sensitive to this idea of Krishna says, Didami buddhi yogam, I'm going to give the intelligence. So we can try to be sincere and see, oh, well, Krishna's telling me such and such. That's, I'm busting my back trying to do something and it's not working out. It's interrupting my spiritual life. And so I've got to stop doing it. At the same time, we can't just have our head in the sand and say, oh, Krishna will provide. It's all, Prabhupada indicated that God helps those who help themselves. That's another aspect of the way we understand Krishna consciousness, that we don't just, it's not kind of like, well, whatever will be, will be. It's not like, oh, it's all predestined. And so we should just go with the flow. That's not really our philosophy, to just, oh, I'm just going with the flow and not trying very hard. We don't see Prabhupada like that. Prabhupada was just going with the flow, not trying very hard. He was working like anything. I mean, if you study his life, you see he was working in the middle of the night, translating, dictating, and I saw in the mornings he would talk to his leaders and give advice on management and practical matters. That was late morning, early morning. He would give classes in the temples, and in the afternoons he would rest a little bit. But then in the late afternoon he would give sort of audience, so anyone could come and see Prabhupada then in the late afternoons, and he would speak with people, and he would take a morning walk, and then lots of devotees would go with him on the morning walk. So he just, all these things he was doing, and then traveling. I just can't imagine. I just traveled a couple of days ago, and it took me 2 days to recover. I was saying, God, you're such a baby. I was telling myself. Prabhupada was traveling all over the world, Australia, Far East, India, Europe, United States, everywhere he was going. And sometimes he'd go someplace and they would take him for 2 hours in the car, and he would speak to 5 or 10 people. And he wouldn't complain. He would say, all right, that's okay. Anyway, so I've sort of gone off tangent a little bit, but yeah, try hard, work hard, but at the same time, not so hard that you get distracted from spiritual life, and balance.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
And my observation is that balance is very difficult. It's like I tell myself, balance, balance, you know, and that's kind of like a mantra. You have to say it over and over again because it's hard to be balanced. Okay, I'll stop there. Gaurav, you were going to say something?
No, Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I really like your explanation for, that Atmanivedan Prabhu's question on, how Krishna consciousness is, how to present it and, how is it different. So I like that one that, you said that, that Buddhism, if someone's asking some like hypothetical question.
Yes.
So,
I like that. Prabhupada would say that, are you following? They say no, then follow, become a follower, Don't just come with this hypothetical question. Yes.
I think the other thing I liked was, like competition can be good, like, so I think that one.
Yes. Prabhupada had his own disciples compete with each other. And sometimes he would have to control it. It would get out of hand. But the idea was to be competitive, to serve Krishna and to see, oh, this devotee is serving nicely, so let me try to do more. And so that was going on and quite a lot during Prabhupada's time. And it had a very positive result. And yes, sometimes it got out of hand. Devotees were, I don't know, becoming too competitive, I guess, or too maybe antagonistic or something.
All right, thanks.
But that's the life. We have to take a risk. That Prabhupada liked us to take a risk for Krishna also. Everyone is involved in taking risks in this world. I mean, people take financial risks. They take now there's a lot of, I think more now than in my youth, but there are all these high risk sports. People go and risk their lives climbing mountains and doing all kinds of things. And so it's a natural thing in life that we don't want to just sit down and do nothing. We want to get out there and sort of take some risk, physical, financial, whatever it happens to be. So yeah, let's do it. But for Krishna, that's a wonderful thing. Prabhupada would often say that, take a risk for Krishna.
Oh, Prabhu, why? Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Gaurav.
it's okay. I was just mentioning, I, forgot to mention last time, your book, after this whole COVID thing, when COVID hit, that because I read your book, the disasters on the natural disasters. So, I think it really fits well in what's going on. And thanks for the book,
Thank you.
All right, well, that's all I had to say. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Should I ask Dayananda Prabhu?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, more of the devil's advocate. I like to take that.
Oh,
role,
good.
Apparently.
Excellent.
Okay, but why do we have to work hard? Why, most of the people we see working hard, you watch TV or you see people in business or whatever working hard. Again, it seems to be one person, either getting, just being very absorbed in things that don't really matter, or people trying to take what belongs, they're trying to take something that someone else could have, they want it for themselves. It seems like that's the theme that I see around me when I see people working hard. And spiritual life, why not just you mentioned yourself that, they find the balance. Why not find the balance where I just sit down and, I chant and, I can continue these discussions, but I sit down, chant, read, and, take myself out of that rat race. Why do I have to be part of all that?
Yeah, it's a good point, and many devotees have tried to make those decisions for themselves, and there's nothing wrong with being detached from the world. We have in our line Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. He's an example of. I think everybody knows, but that's the guru of the guru of the guru. So I won't say specifically, but it's guru of guru kind of. So it goes back in our line, this Gaur Kishore, and he was like that. He gave up the world and he became completely aloof from the world. But the thing is that such a person is an extraordinary individual, and Prabhupada, when he came to the West, he saw that the way that we have this materialistic culture, and it's almost impossible for us to go against the grain of that culture. And when I say hard work, that's sort of a standard in our American culture. And we work hard. We see Prabhupada work hard. So he's a good example of that hard work. But he transferred it completely to service to Krishna. I mean, he was working hard, but he was working in service. Now, what you said was, well, why not sit down and chant and read and be contemplative and that kind of thing? But we're bombarded by a materialistic culture. We're subjected to something that militates against that way of life, that contemplative way of life. And my observation is that the young people, it's usually young people who decide that they're going to take up that kind of life, they don't last. It's very difficult to follow through with that. So when you're young, if you make that decision, I don't consider it a very wise decision unless somebody is really an extraordinary individual. And there are some extraordinary individuals. I'm not denying that. Also, I've seen some very extraordinary individuals who made that decision as a young person. But in general, young people should find some hard work and do that either in fully in Krishna consciousness, like following Prabhupada, or go out and have a family and try to lead a balanced life and work in the world. So that's practical. It's something very practical. Prabhupada tended to be practical. And sometimes his disciples would come to him and try to be overly renounced. And Prabhupada would discourage that. Overly renounced meaning overly aloof from worldly activities. There's a verse in the Gita that's coming up, is that that even for an intelligent person, even for somebody who's a little advanced, intelligent means discriminating. Even for a discriminating person, the power of the senses are so strong that one can be swept away like the wind can carry a boat. So the influence of the world is so strong, it's so powerful that we have to set our course, and we have to work hard to and it's a world of action. So when we choose to try to suppress action itself in an attempt to control the senses, it's not recommended. In the, what is that verse in the Nachakarma, Nachakriya, anyway, I can't remember now the Sanskrit, but the essence of the verse is that Arjuna is asking Krishna about sacrifice, and Krishna says that one should not give up work and one should not give up sacrifice. In other words, the basic responsibilities. We shouldn't just whimsically give up our responsibilities, thinking that that's the way we're going to control our senses. The objective is to control one's senses and redirect our focus on the soul, on Krishna, on spiritual life. Control the senses. Our system is not to control the senses through some contemplative manner by sitting down and just, we spend a good amount of time chanting our Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And just to sit down and think that we will be able to direct our focus on spiritual life and control the senses is, it's not a practical idea. We might be in that kind of mood for a few months or a couple of years or something, but in general, the influence, especially in this country, is so powerful that it's not going to last. Also, it might be a little arrogant to think that we're an exception. Not necessarily. I mean, we have to investigate our own hearts, but it could be a little arrogant to think that, well, I'm an exception. I can pull this off.
And Prabhu, I mean, Prabhu, I mean that, and this is a really wonderful answer. And I was just thinking in support of your point.
You
and
can't
then,
support my point now. You're just changed. What's going on? No, I'm kidding.
I was convinced. So in support of your last point, in which, you're saying, well, there could be that exception that someone's extraordinary. But then again, even for the extraordinary person, right? So Krishna says, whatever example a great man, a great person sets, the common person follows. He says that on the one hand. And on the other hand, we have a disciplic succession, meaning a succession of, right, guru and disciples, teachers and followers going back over, centuries. And there are specific instructions that are there. And for those who are dedicated to spirituality, with in the sense that they're actually, even their work is like, part of a renounced lifestyle, meaning that they're living in the temple, always doing, even for them, the instruction for them is, even if you're extraordinary, you should go and help, manage our temples, or go out and, serve the deities so that people can come to the temple and appreciate our preaching, or you can go out directly and preach, So in other words, everything is meant for the preaching. So Prabhupada established that, and he's the teacher who brought you Krishna consciousness, or everyone Krishna consciousness. And then, or if you're not living in the temple, certainly the instructions are there. Be responsible if you're gonna be living in this world, use your time well to, work hard, give some of the fruits of your labor to support the spreading of Krishna consciousness, make your home a place where it's conducive to those living in the home, including yourself, to be Krishna conscious, and try to be Krishna conscious while you're working. So even for that extraordinary person, sure, hypothetically, maybe they're an exception and they could sit in, under a tree and chant all day. And yet, if they're so extraordinary, then they would understand. But my teacher said, this is what I should do. I should go actually work hard, whether it's teaching Krishna consciousness, supporting the teaching of Krishna consciousness, or at my work, during the, the main hours of the day. So anyways, I just wanted to add that in support of your point and admitting that I changed my perspective due to your being so convincing. Hare Krishna.
I don't think it was due to what I said. I think you always had that idea. I didn't convince you of anything. So it's 7 o'clock. Are we supposed to?
Yes, Prabhu.
Is Bhakti Sasha doing his job? I thought you were supposed to be the police and tell us to stop.
The funny thing about it is, I happen to be I deputize certain policemen. So ultimately, I try to appear to be the detached one, but in fact, he's doing such things at my behest. But anyway, so thanks for Sasha letting me do it for you this time. But yeah, Dayananda Prabhu, thanks a lot for the wonderful class and discussion, and such a clear but I don't know, in-depth, sort of inquisitive approach to exploring the subject matter. Very interesting, and I think it was helpful for us to, most of us to really consider these points and understand them better. Because I think we can always do that. So I thank you very much. And yes, if you'd please chant for just a couple of minutes. The kirtan can be short, just since, given that we're not in the same room.
I just wanted to say, is Will still here?
He is.
I kept wanting.
Yes.
I wanted to say that I'm sorry that I noticed that there were a couple of people that we didn't get a chance to call on you and to encourage you to.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I plan on being back. I look forward to coming back.
Good. Yes, and maybe we'll solicit your input a little bit in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
And Susan also. I didn't say anything.
Susan's quieter than usual.
I'm tired, yes. I just wanted to, lay back and listen to the lecture. It was wonderful. So I'm going to point, but I don't want to go into this because it doesn't seem to be that important. So I'm enjoying the fruit of the labor. Meaning, even from our worship, we want some fruit of the labor, or we're trying to avoid, we're trying to avoid that karma or something like that. So, but that's really, really not very important. I thank you for the lecture, and and for the way you explain things, and how you expand our understanding. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. I didn't quite follow your what you said, but yeah, we want to enjoy Krishna. That's.
Yeah, we also want to enjoy the fruits. We want to enjoy the purification. We want to enjoy. If I take Krishna prey on food, I want that benefit. I'm not saying that this special human being doesn't really care for the benefits. So that was like, but we want those benefits, right? We want the purification. We want the the joy that comes, from chanting and things like that. But it's not really important.
So why don't you chant?
Me chant? I'm terrible.
Oh, no, I was saying Atma. What? Maybe Atma Nivedana can chant.
Okay, sure, Prabhu. Thank you. Okay, so and for those who aren't with us every week, just so you know, so the way we'll do the chanting is everyone unfortunately will be muted while I leading it will not be, just because there's the time is actually, although it appears to be when one person's speaking, the others are listening, it appears that we're all in sync in time, but we're actually not via Zoom. So to avoid a cacophony, just one person is unmuted at a time. But so I'll sing the Hare Krishna mantra, which Sasha put out the words kindly again via the chat. And every time after I sing those 16 words, if you kindly repeat, even though we don't hear you, then you'll get more of the experience of how the kirtan, the chanting, is supposed to be, and it's nice. Feel free just to listen, but if you decide to chant along, which most of us do, it makes the experience even better. It'll just be for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're done. And here we go. I'll begin with mantras to our leaders and predecessor teachers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. I'll do that again. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone can chant. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Everyone, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. That's it. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki. His Grace Dayananda Prabhu ki. To all the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. So thanks a lot for being with us this evening. Special thanks to Dayananda Prabhu. If you'd like to join me in expressing appreciation for Dayananda, now is the time. His Grace Dayananda Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
For keeping up your interest and your practice in Krishna consciousness and spiritual life.